listening to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. This is episode 136, where we talk about shooting in the cold weather. Even though the temperatures are dropping, if you have an outdoor range or public land near you, you can still shoot. In fact, shooting in the cold is a great way to train with gloves on or to see how your firearms and ammo function in the cold, and we go over all of that in this episode. Thanks for listening, and as always, we hope you enjoy episode 136 of Range Minded, the ways to shoot in the colder months. Hello and welcome to Range Minded from Independence Indoor Shooting. My name is Mark Long, and I am joined as always by...
What's happening? It's Steve Zimmerman on the Eastern Front.
In the cold front, it sounds like.
Yeah, we were talking off air. Like, it's not terrible right now. It's, what did I say, 21 degrees?
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be chilly in the morning.
Well, and the thing is, I've learned about Idaho is that it's if you're in the sun, you're okay.
Yeah, or if it's not windy.
Right, but if you're out of the sun, you're in the shade for a while, or it's windy, it's not too bad. That's the Midwest is the same way too, where it's the wind is really bad, and if you're out of the sun, it's not good either. So,
yeah, you should be used to that. Isn't Chicago the windy city, right?
It sure is. It sure is. So I'm used to it. It's the wind still is bothersome. I don't really enjoy the wind very much, but
I hate the wind.
You know, just cold in the sunshine, I can handle no problem. So.
Yeah, I was up very early this morning.
Really?
Had to take care of some things, and it was cold and dark.
Yeah, that's what I don't like. That's what bothers me is that how it gets dark early. Like, I can handle cold all day, but if it's dark all day, or like, you know, you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and it's dark, I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
Not a fan at all. So, because the days are shorter and there's just less sunlight, you know.
It is cool in the summertime, like when you get up before the sun shows up, and there's just something about a summertime sunrise. That's pretty awesome. But,
oh, sure.
And I guess sometimes in the wintertime it's okay, but I just don't like the cold.
Yeah. I mean, I can deal with the cold, but when you combine everything together, the cold, the wind, and the lack of sunlight, it's kind of a bummer for me, so.
That's part of living in Idaho, though.
Sure is. So, but one good thing about living in Idaho is that you can shoot all year round, even if it is cold, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Heck yeah.
You know, there is winter shooting that's possible, and you know, depending on where you're at in the country or the world, you might be able to shoot in the winter too, which I actually highly encourage because your firearms and your gear might actually act and operate much differently in the winter than in the cold months or in the friendly confines of a shooting range.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it's not so much that your life-saving tools react differently, but maybe it's your hands that react differently to those tools if they're cold and lethargic. I mean, we all know what it's like to have cold hands. Like,
not
they
great.
They just don't work.
Right. So, but you know, at the same time too, you might have cabin fever right now and you need to get out and do something, and maybe you didn't think that you could go shooting, but you really can. And it'd be a good way to get out and enjoy some fresh air and get away from people, but still enjoy the shooting sports. So we're going to talk about a little bit everything and anything shooting in the winter related here, and some things you might want to consider, and some things that you know, you can really you can do and actually might be beneficial for you in terms of training and such that you might not have thought about. Yeah. So the first thing I would say is that, you know, there are a lot of outdoor shooting ranges, obviously, and just because it's cold out doesn't mean that your shooting range, your local outdoor shooting range is going to close. In fact, obviously there are some public shooting ranges that don't close at all. It's open for business anytime, really. You know, like there's one out here, I would say, I think it's Nampa or like Caldwell-ish.
The George Norris range?
George Norris shooting range. That's a public range open, I think, from sunrise to sunset, which is cool. So, but it doesn't close down for the year or anything, I don't believe.
Yeah, I know over here, so we have the Seeps range, and that's where they do a lot of USPSA and IDPA shoots.
Sure.
It's open year-round as long as the road isn't snowed in, and then it's closed until they get it plowed.
Yeah, so that sounds about right.
So it's pretty much open year-round.
Yeah, so you can actually enjoy the shooting sports all year round if you really want to. You just there's some considerations I think that you need to take before you actually get out there and, spend a day shooting. So.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Like I said, I was up early. Didn't mean to yawn on the air here.
That's okay. So yeah, one of the first things I think you'd want to consider is, your hands are going to be colder, and whether you wear gloves or not, it's going to be a different experience than shooting inside or shooting in the warm months. So Steve, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
So that's a really good point. Shooting with gloves on is different than having your bare skin against the gun. For me, like when I'm working, I think you guys know my background. I'm a carpenter by trade. I really hate wearing gloves in the wintertime, but I suffer through it sometimes because it's just so dang cold.
Sure.
But the reason why I hate it is I really like to feel, the hammer in my hand, or in this case, the firearm in my hand. But some people don't. Some people really have to have gloves on. And your firearm, whether it be a rifle, bolt action, shotgun, AR, handgun, whatever, it's going to feel different. It's going to feel different in your hands. And I mean, there are some great gloves out there. In fact, last time I was at the range, we have some Victus gloves that are cold. They're a pretty heavy glove, but it's kind of hard to explain. But the trigger finger unzips on the side, and you can bring your finger outside of the finger of the glove, which I thought was cool.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
But what you may not realize is not only does the firearm feel different in your hand. Let's just go to a semi-automatic pistol. Like if you can imagine a Smith & Wesson or a Glock.
Right.
Well, now you got that extra bulk on the back of your hand. It may be reacting with the slide of the handgun.
Good.
Because of the bulk of the glove, or you just won't get your finger inside that trigger guard at all.
Yeah, that could be it too, especially if it's a tighter fit. Maybe let's say it's a subcompact or something like that, what you're used to carrying. That extra, half an inch, quarter inch of difference might make all the difference in the world. And, if you can't get into the trigger guard, you're going to have a whole host of problems. You can't even fire your weapon, in that regard. So
that could be a serious issue. It could be a life or death issue, but it also could be maybe even a self-injury issue if you're fumbling around out there in the desert with your gloves on.
Right.
So it might be worth trying that out at home with an empty gun.
I would
see
say
how
so.
things roll.
Yeah, 100%.
There are some nice gloves out there that are thin. Like I bought a set from a big box outdoor store a long time ago to go snowmobiling. It's just like a first layer glove.
Sure.
And it's nice and thin, and down to like maybe 10 degrees or so. They're good enough to keep your hands warm. But they're thin enough where I can, it really doesn't change anything about the firearm or the way it feels in my hand.
Right.
So there's options out there, but you need to make sure that it works with the firearm that you're carrying. And maybe it's just as simple as changing what you're packing around in the wintertime. I mean, we talked about more clothes you wear, the easier it is to pack a larger gun. So maybe that's the option.
Yeah. Well, and you're talking about handguns specifically, but with long guns, you have those extended or those, larger, trigger guards, or what do you call them on the bottom of the AR? I think it's an extended trigger guard, I guess. Yeah.
So they have I think it's called a winter guard, or just I can't remember what they call it. But you can put, as long as it's not a milled receiver, 100% billet receiver, you can usually change out that trigger guard for a winter glove, whatever. I can't remember the name of it. Someone's like, you idiot, it's this.
Right, everybody, yeah. But that's the whole thing, is that they're not just there to look cool. They actually have that extra space because, most of the time you're wearing gloves, or maybe you see it on duty pistols a little bit more, especially back in the day. You have, extended or larger trigger guards to fit gloved hands. And that's something to consider. Even, like you said, even if you're just going out shooting, in the desert or out at a public range in the cold months and your hands are cold. Especially because I think a lot of people don't think about that your firearm, obviously, if it's made of, metal or steel or an alloy in any regard, it's going to be a lot colder in your hand.
It's going to feel much colder,
to manipulate. I mean, compared to using gloves. I mean, everybody's probably seen A Christmas Story, right? Where the kid sticks his tongue to the flagpole.
Well, he triple dog dared him.
Yeah, well, then that's, you can't go back on that.
And while we're thinking about this, and it came to mind, even some of your less expensive ARs, actually quite a few ARs that are out there that don't have that winter glove guard.
Yeah.
You can take the tip of your bullet, and there's a little push pin or a spring detent on that trigger guard, and you can push that out of the way, and it'll flop out of the way. So I don't have one in front of me. I was going to say I could talk you through it, but if you look at the trigger guard on your AR, and you see one side is either a pin or a set screw, the opposite side should be a plunge.
I believe it's the front on the front side.
I think you're right, and it comes out of the way, and you can fit that gloved finger in there.
Yeah, so that's definitely good to know. But that's why they make those extended ones too. I think, and a lot of billet receivers made out of one piece of steel, aluminum. They usually have an extended or a winter trigger guard in there. I know Aero Precision definitely does that.
Yes,
I think a lot of other billet type receivers do that as well. So, and personally, I like those because I hate putting those trigger guard pins and detents in.
Yeah, it's a pain in the butt.
It really is.
It can be, and it can completely screw up your receiver.
Yeah.
If you know what we're talking about, go back to where we talked about building an AR, then you'll hear it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about, especially if you're, going out shooting on your own or whatever. You're not even just, pulling the charging handle on an AR or racking the slide on a semi-automatic pistol. It's kind of a night and day difference.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is, because sometimes on a bear glove, not only is the slide cold, but your hands don't feel as grippy as they normally do, and sometimes getting a scrape or a pinch on a cold hand, it feels so much worse.
Oh, it's so bad, so much worse.
So yeah, I've done that with my Glock in the cold, and then I cry because I'm a wuss.
Well, and you brought up a good point too, is where having that glove, depending on how you grip that firearm, you might actually interfere with the slide, and your hand might not get bit by the slide, but you may introduce just enough kind of fabric or something for that slide to grab, and it may not actually go back into battery and cycle properly.
Yeah. And worst case scenario, you just do a tap rack or something, or you rip a glove, which is annoying, but
that's something that you'll want to know beforehand, which
is a good experience.
Which is a great reason to go out there and go shoot, even if it is cold, is that you're able to, experience what it's like shooting outside in the cold without, the comforts of a modern shooting range. And not only seeing what your firearms do, but maybe the ammunition might act differently than you expect as well. So definitely something to consider there.
In reality, your gun lube might act just a little bit differently too. If you're using a grease instead of an oil or something, it could react differently too.
Yeah, that's
like depending on the temperature. Like if
so,
it's
do
really
you
cold.
do you change your the gun lube that you use for the seasons, or do you use it all year round?
No, I tend to just use the same stuff all year round. I've been looking on some Facebook posts about some guys that have made their own gun grease that I kind of want to try out with some synthetics.
Sure.
And they've had really, really good luck with it. And maybe I'll dig up that recipe and maybe even share it on the Facebook page. But it's something I kind of want to try. I've used gun grease before. I've used Cherry Bomb. I don't know if we still carry that at the store. That stuff's pretty amazing. Yeah. And it smells so good.
Sure does.
But it lasts a little bit longer. Doesn't cook off as quick as some gun oils.
Right. Yeah, and that's one of the things too. Like I've seen big things about Slip 2000 is a great kind of all around gun lube to use during the winter months. And then some people actually make their own. There's all kinds of things to consider. But if you're,
I normally just use rim oil, and I've been fine with that. Whether it's the spray or the little applicator, I've never had any issues.
Yeah, I started when in my the beginnings of my gun journey. I actually used to use CLP all the time. Yeah, and I never really had a problem with that. But then I learned that in terms of cleaning and lubrication, there's actually better options out there.
Yes.
So I discovered, Cherry Bomb, and then Slip 2000 is pretty good as well.
No, I got this stuff. I wonder where I put it. I think it's called Huckleberry. And it was a guy that we had at one of the expos a couple summers ago.
Okay, yeah.
And I picked up a bottle of it, and I haven't used it yet, but I watched him use it on a couple things, and it seems to work well.
That's good. It's an important thing.
Like I said, I haven't used it yet. I was cleaning my safe out, and I found it again, and then I can't remember where I put it.
But no, I mean that's it. You can use, different gun lubes depending on the time of year or whatever. But if you, I'd say maybe that would be if you spend a lot of time outside. You might spend a lot more time outside than I do, obviously, but for somebody working in an office or maybe just going to their house, to their work or whatever, you wouldn't have to worry about it as much. There's not really a huge temperature fluctuation, in that regard. But if you are going shooting outside for an extended period of time, you may notice a difference, and you may notice that it, especially like you said, if you use a grease or something like that, it'll gum up the works a little bit more.
Yeah. It really depends on the synthetic compositions, and I'm no scientist, and I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's beyond our scope of expertise, or lack thereof, but definitely something to consider. Maybe you're spending more time outside, or maybe even like to keep the house cooler than most other people do. You never know.
Yeah.
But like you said, at the same time, you don't really know how all that stuff's going to react in the cold weather unless you actually go out there and shoot. And if you're, blessed to have public land like we are here in Idaho, or you have an outdoor range, which I would imagine you have to be hard pressed not to find an outdoor range in every state.
Some of them might be a little bit more of a journey than others in certain states, but I bet you have one within 100 miles.
Yeah, and even just maybe once a year, it's kind of interesting to go check it out and enjoy the cold weather, and see how your firearms operate. But if nothing else, just checking out how you operate with gloves on, because even if you've ever tried to use a cell phone with gloves on, it's a whole different story. So imagine those fine motor skills, trying to get a mag out or a mag in and all that, outside, it's a whole different ball game.
Yep. Indeed.
So, and you were saying that the range by you does competitions and stuff. USPSA and IDPA. Do they do that stuff all year round? Year round. So that's impressive. That and then what better way to learn and to experiment with your loadout than trying to compete with it. Yeah. And I know the guys that run that range, and most gun guys are pretty awesome anyways, or range, folks running the range or managing the range. Most of them are pretty awesome anyways, but Tim and the guys over here at Seeps, sorry. Yeah. They're very safety conscious. Like, I know that for 100%. And they're just fun to be around. Like, the amount of knowledge that rolls around there, and even outside of the gun community, the amount of knowledge and intelligence that's there is pretty amazing. Yeah, that's a great thing to be around, especially now. I mean, I wanted to talk about shooting outdoors and shooting in the winter, especially because I think a lot of people are going to be, between the pandemic and politics and Christmas shopping, there's really not a lot of time for yourself. You may think, okay, what can I do? How do I get out and enjoy some time for myself? Well, you can still go shoot, even if you're, worried about, the pandemic or whatnot, you can still get out and shoot away from other people, either in public lands or at an outdoor range. I would say every outdoor range I've been to, there's at least 6 feet of space in between, people. Yeah, almost always. Yeah. So don't think that you can't get out there and enjoy, a little bit of shooting. And, I think we've talked about in a couple episodes the differences between indoor and outdoor shooting. I actually really enjoy outdoor shooting. I find it a lot more relaxing than indoor shooting. It may not be as productive maybe, but
Well, there's less noise and percussion to deal with, and it's usually less crowded.
Yeah. And like we said, with like one over here, the George North shooting range is run by, I think it's the Idaho, Bureau of Land Management or whatever. So it doesn't cost you anything as long as there's people there, or as long as, you can get there, it's accessible to you and doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah. Which is awesome.
So, obviously you're a little more responsible with your own safety and things of that, but if you need to get out of the house and get away and all that, it's definitely something to look into.
Yes. And, if you're, well, just kind of by way of thinking about it, if you don't know if you have a range close to you or not, we've talked about the NSSF before, but if you jump on, they have a website called wheretoshoot.org.
Yeah.
And that gives you I think there's an interactive map on there that you can, or maybe type in your postcode or something, zip code, and it'll show you where there's a range close to you.
Yeah, it's actually a phenomenal place to go check out. I think there's even a map too. I'm pulling it up right now. Yeah. If you type in your zip code, you can find where you can go shoot. I think it does public and private, all different kinds.
I think so.
And you can really dig into that. So I'm trying to do a search now. It's saying that there aren't any. Oh, I had the wrong thing picked out. That's why. But it's saying that there are no results, which is not true.
We know that's incorrect.
Right. So it just might be my internet. Who knows? My internet's been acting funky lately.
Let me try.
But pretty much whatever state you're in, you should be able to go find, places to shoot or, indoor, outdoor, anything like that. Another thing you might consider, which, maybe not in a public range, but BLM land, depending on, I guess, how brave you are, shooting at night, the days are shorter, shooting at sundown, or anything like that. Have you ever done anything kind of night shooting outside?
Oh, yeah. And actually, night shooting is a ton of fun.
Yeah, I have not had the pleasure, unfortunately, but I would really like to.
Yeah, so maybe I shouldn't share this story, but I'll share a different one.
Perfect.
Shooting in the dark can be a ton of fun. You can go buy glow sticks.
Yeah.
And the contents inside the glow sticks is non-toxic, at least the ones that I found. and you can drip that on clay pigeons, or you can put it on the targets on the in front of your backstop.
Oh, okay.
And so you can make it a ton of fun.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I was thinking of, that if you're maybe kind of a little worried that, or preoccupied that the days are shorter and you won't be able to get out there after work, you can go out to the BLM land. I mean, as long as you're being responsible and doing the right things, pack it in, pack it out, make sure you're following the 4 rules of gun safety and all that. I don't see why you couldn't shoot at night. No,
there's no reason. Now, if you're shooting rifles or handguns, you really need to make sure that, you got to follow the safety rules, right? You got to know what's your target and what's beyond.
Right. Yeah. The responsibility of what you're doing is heightened by a large factor.
But if you have weapon-mounted lights or night vision, all that stuff's a lot of fun in the dark to play with.
Yeah, and I mean, even if it is cold, obviously it gets colder when the sun goes down or whatever, but if you're not all that worried about, maybe you're layered up properly and you have all the right gear and everything, you could really do some serious, awesome training out in the cold, in the dark, when nobody else is around, because I almost guarantee you, ain't nobody going to be around during those times,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's nice if you're running a flashlight and you're shooting at nighttime, you'll see what it's like with that muzzle flash and the little extra, the powder burn off and stuff. You'll see what it does to your flashlight to start with. And you'll see how hard it can be if you're rapid firing between the muzzle flash and whatever burn off is in front of your light.
Right.
And so it's a good experience. Like you're going to learn something from it.
Right. Well, and that, that brings up too, is that maybe, if you've ever thought about, your home defense situation in the middle of the night perspective, having a weapon mounted light that say, oh, well, I got this one for $20 off Amazon or whatever versus, a Streamlight or a Surefire or anything like that, you'll probably really be able to see the difference in lumens and how much a target is lit up or not. Then again, same thing too, you could say about a muzzle device, whether you have a flash hider or, let's say you have like some sort of SBR of some kind, and that muzzle flash really just blasts you. You'll learn a lot real fast about what it's like to be in the dark.
Or even a suppressor.
Sure.
All that stuff's good to know in the dark.
Because that's when you'll be using it.
Well, yeah, maybe when everything's quiet.
Theoretically. So, there's a lot of good reasons to use, the opportunity you have to be out there. And, I think too that, having new shooters out there in the cold might not be the worst idea either, as long as they kind of realize that, it's not a very comfortable range. Maybe not first time shooters.
Yeah, you might get a bad experience for brand new shooters, but somebody who's caught the bug and really wants to get out and shoot it's fun to switch things up anyways.
Yeah.
For any level of shooter.
Yeah. Maybe somebody who, like you said, is just maybe new-ish or has a little less experience than you. You might be able to really, especially with, my favorite thing about outdoor shooting, which we've talked about before, is that you can set up dynamic targets, and that you can move from station to station. You can, set up multiple targets at different distances, which is a lot different than most indoor ranges because, most of the time you're usually just kind of restricted to your one lane, which is understandable in in terms of safety and having, multiple people in one spot. But, there's really nothing like outdoor shooting, being able to set up your own, situation that way,
Yeah, absolutely.
So might be something to check into and look into as well. But and we talked about it a little bit, but we talked about it a little more is talking about ammo. I think we talked about this from summer to winter carry. Is that you might want to consider, if you're really serious about home defense or about concealed carrying, people are going to be wearing more layers as it gets colder, and that might affect your ammo decision, in concealed carrying. And can't really test that out in an indoor range, but, if you're outdoors or in an outdoor range, you might be able to kind of experiment a little bit more to see, how your ammo affects, winter jackets or parkas or whatever, depending on where you're at.
Yeah, if you got something to shoot at, maybe old coats or go to the secondhand store or something.
Yeah. One of our, YouTube favorites, Paul Harrell, I think does a couple of those. He's got a pretty good setup of simulating a human target with his ribs and his meat that he gets from the store and all that. I think that's
his oranges. And
yeah, I think those are lungs, right?
Yeah.
So that's definitely,
the high-tech meat target.
Yeah. If you are considering, testing out your, situation, you might be able to do the same thing. And, but that's kind of like what the Hornady Critical Defense, I think, has those, red, like kind of fillers in their, hollow points, right?
Yep. At Critical Defense and Critical Duty, they both have those little silicone or whatever it is. They're just and I think we've talked about that just keeps it from clogging up. So when it does impact a fleshy, mushy thing, that it opens up properly.
Right. It doesn't get stuck in one spot or not. But that's also for for colder weather, and coats. And cause, you think about it, if it's, 9 degrees out, like it might be in Eastern Idaho, you might be wearing a base layer and a shirt and a button down and a hoodie and, a parka over that. I mean,
or flannel. Like I like to wear flannels in the wintertime, and a good flannel is pretty thick, pretty dense.
Yeah, exactly. And having, a bullet that's supposed to spread out its energy and turn into a bunch of different fragments as it goes along. That could happen in a hoodie or a sweatshirt or a flannel, and not do what it's intended to do.
Yep, absolutely.
And you don't know until you kind of try that out for yourself, especially because different ammo reacts different ways with different firearms, and you just never know. So
yeah, absolutely.
But outside shooting is fun no matter what. In the cold, I've shot in the cold before, and it's just a good way to get out of the house, if nothing else. You don't have to, because I feel like a lot of people, let their fitness kind of goals go, or they eat more, or they don't go out as much, which is understandable because it's cold. You don't want to go anywhere, but
that's what January 1st is for,
right? Which we're rapidly approaching. But you don't have to kind of let the cold weather stop you. In fact, I think it's a little more fun to go out and shoot in the cold weather. More, at least once or twice a year to see how you react to it, how your firearms react and all that kind of stuff.
And we talk about clothing. I know we've talked about winter carry compared to summer carry.
Right.
It still might be worth talking about.
Sure.
Proper shooting attire when we are outside, or at least being prepared with some extra jackets and stuff like that, just in case. Like if you're going out to the desert, and in reality, anywhere you should be this way anyways, you should have some kind of a emergency kit in your car.
Sure.
Even with some couple bottles of water and maybe an MRE or granola bars or something, just in case.
Yeah, I mean, you could get stuck in the snow, or you could get caught in a snowstorm or whatever. It's the same no matter what, and so it's good to consider. But that also makes me think of outside in the winter is a good place to test your winter concealed carry setup too.
Absolutely. Because
a lot of people maybe just think, okay, well, I'll just use the same gun that I have been, and I will, just put a sweatshirt and a hoodie or a flannel and a winter jacket over it, and everything will be good. But it's not.
Then you can't get it out.
Yeah, you can't present the firearm maybe as well as that you maybe are used to with just a t-shirt or a button down or whatever. It's definitely good to practice with that. Even if you have a larger gun, it still might be harder to present that firearm even with the added amount of layers. So
yeah, because there's more things to get snagged up on. Yeah,
but and that's a good point too. You said being safe and being prepared, because if you go out there into the desert or into the BLM land, you might not have the same resources as you do. And it might be a good way to test that kind of stuff. Say, okay, let's pretend that, we're stuck out here and we have to fend for ourselves for a day or a night or something like that. And, obviously your concealed carry, your personal protection goes along with that to a degree, but, it might not be a bad way to try it out as well. I wouldn't necessarily say camp out overnight in the middle of nowhere, but,
no, but it's worth having a setup just in case you do, a blanket, something. You need to have something.
Yeah.
And like I said, in reality, you probably should be doing that anyways.
Yeah, very true. So let's, I think that's all I got. It's kind of a shorter episode this week, but, it's still important about winter shooting and thinking about what you're doing in the cold months. Don't let your skills kind of go to waste or anything like that.
It is true. I have shot in the cold. Off air we were talking about how cold it's going to get over here and how cold I have felt over here. I've shot in 19 below.
Oof.
I told a group of guys in the neighborhood, I'm like, hey, I'm going shooting Saturday. You can come with me or not. I'm going to go.
Well,
because I said that, I had to live up to it.
Right.
And there was a couple people that showed up too, but I decided, by damn, I got to shoot. And I was sick of being in the house.
Yeah.
And it was cold. It was a little uncomfortable, but I still had fun.
Well, but I imagine it was worth it, and you learned a lot, right?
Yeah. I learned that I hate winter.
I don't think anybody likes being out in the winter,
I know people that like winter.
Well, those are called skiers, I guess.
And snowmobilers.
Yeah, that's true. But I think being out in the cold without like a snowmobile or a ski or a pair of skis or being able to go into a lodge whenever you want, not as great.
No, it's not as fun.
One last note I guess I'll say is that if you do plan on going shooting out in the winter or in the cold months, maybe in BLM land or maybe a public range that isn't used all that often, make sure you do bring somebody with you just in case something does happen so you're not alone. Let people know where you're going. Obviously, you want to be safe and smart about it. Just like, I'm going shooting, I'll be back. And then, nobody hears from you ever again.
Yeah, it really is a good idea. I think I shared the story where I got hit with one of my own ricochets one time.
Yeah.
And I was by myself, and that, luckily, no blood, but I got hit in the upper thigh, and that could have been bad if it did enter and penetrate the flesh. And so it's good to have a buddy with you.
Yeah, and I would say that would apply no matter when you're going shooting, but especially in the winter months. Things can happen, and even your car can act up, or just strange things happen when it's cold outside. I mean, I was heading to work the other day, and I've had no problems with my car, but when I got into work, my battery started acting up, my electronic system started acting up, and didn't know what was going on. Thankfully, I was at work or whatever, but that could have happened anywhere, on the highway or wherever. And
or on the way to Silver City,
oof.
You just never know.
Yeah, and that actually happens. So if you don't know, Silver City's a ghost town that's about 3 hours away from the Boise area, and it's only accessible by a dirt road. And actually, what was it? Did you hear that story a couple of years ago about the guy who and his family who was stuck in his car for 3 or 4 days because they were trying to go up to Silver City?
Oh, I don't think so. Yeah,
I'll have to look it up real quick. But it was like a guy and his wife and his kid. Stuck for a couple of days or something like that, and he was missing. And I think that everybody was found okay, hopefully.
I don't remember that story.
Yeah, this was last year in February. I mean, Idaho is really nothing to mess with. If I've learned one thing about living out in Idaho is that elevation in the snow and all that is not anything to mess with. So
you hear the word desert and you think, oh, it's just kind of hot and arid out there, but no, it's also cold and dry.
Yeah.
and unwelcoming. Don't move here. I'm just kidding. You can
stay away. Yeah. So I can't find how the story ended, but a guy and his family was stuck for several days in his car.
Jeez.
It was his wife and his 1-year-old baby were trying to get to Silver City, and they got stuck in the snow. And he went to go for help, and I don't know if he ever came back or not, unfortunately.
Mistake number 1: never leave your car.
Right, exactly. So, so it's something you don't want to mess with, but you want to make sure you have kind of everything thought about, and tell people where you're going if you do go out to that public land and shoot or whatever, because you never know. You might get stuck, even if you're only an hour away.
That's right. So,
you got anything else to add?
No, that's pretty much it. Just make sure if you are going to go outside and play that, like we talked about, you got the stuff you need just in case. And take somebody with you. It's okay to take friends shooting. I know ammunition's kind of tight right now and things are expensive. But maybe you guys can, ante up together and buy as much as you can find, which may only be one box. It might just be one box. And if it is, make that one box meaningful and use it as a training tool.
Definitely. I was going to ask, has ammo gotten more plentiful, less plentiful, or is it about the same over in Eastern Idaho over there?
No, I can't find 9 to save my life. Yeah. And go ahead.
I was going to say, but you have some 5.7, right?
I have some 5.7, and I am not shooting that gun for a while.
Right.
But it was fun to buy for no reason.
Well, you've got it, which is important.
Yeah. I cannot find 5.7 on the shelves no matter where I go.
Which is crazy.
Boise to Idaho Falls, there's nothing.
Yeah. We'll have to talk about that next weekend, maybe. The state of the firearms industry now, because the election's over, obviously, and things might be different. There might be more panic buying. There might be less panic buying than usual. I really don't know. I haven't thought about it, to be honest with you.
It really has been kind of subtle, but I'm sure we could find subtle. It's subtle as far as what it's been in the last 6 months, but I'm sure if we do some digging, we'll probably find some interesting stories.
I believe so. So I think that'll be what happens next week. But I think for now, we'll leave it on that note. If you have any questions or suggestions or anything we missed out on outdoor winter shooting, let us know. podcast@iishooting.com. Or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Range Minded Podcast as well.
Yeah. Be safe. Go take somebody shooting.
Yes. Maybe inside for their first time.
Just not in your house.
No.
At a range.
In the indoor range, because those are thankfully open usually 24/7, 365. At least I know Independence is, except for a couple of holidays.
Yeah, and it's something that's important to consider as far as shooting indoors. Sorry, this is like a side note.
That's okay.
In the wintertime is usually much busier. So prepare for some wait times to get on the range, and maybe once you hit a certain time quota, I know we have a 1 hour quota if everything's busy.
Yeah.
You'll be asked to hop off the lane and get back in line. So just be prepared for that, because indoor ranges are super busy in the wintertime.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah,
because nobody wants to go out in the cold.
Well, I think a lot of people don't think about that is, you usually pay by the hour at a range, but if there's nobody waiting, you could be there for 2 hours and maybe you pay for 2 hours, but you're not going to get kicked off of the range and lose your spot. But, as wait times become heavier and there's more to consider, more people that are trying to get in there because, like you said, they don't want to be out in the cold. You may have to get off after your hour, get off the lane and come back, or come the next day. I think the best times would be during the week in the middle of the day, if you can, or
usually, yep,
early in the morning. Although I think a lot of people probably think that as well. So
usually around, at least at Independence, usually a good time to come in is around 1 o'clock or so.
Yeah.
And then, after 5 is kind of anybody's guess.
Yeah, I would say the meal times too, like you said, 1 o'clock, maybe even noon, where most people are going to take a break for lunch, no matter what day of the week it is. Especially on the weekends. But then again, there may be people who are, 9 to 5ers who are going to take their lunch hour to go shoot real fast, and depending on how close they are to the range. And
yeah, I saw that in Idaho Falls, and I saw that in Boise as well. So
yeah, you can always call your range and say, hey, what's usually a busy time? What's a good time to come by that's not too busy? Usually they're pretty honest with you, say, hey, yeah, it's usually not too busy around then, because as you well know, Steve, you could have 2 people in the range at one set of time, and then 15 minutes later, every lane is taken up.
Yeah.
So, but usually the people who are working at the range know kind of how the patterns are and all that if you want to shoot indoors. But hey, if it is too busy and you want to get away from people, maybe just take that as an opportunity to go see what kind of outdoor options there are in the cold months.
In the Treasure Valley, there's a few options other than going out to the desert.
Yeah.
Eastern Idaho, there's 2 or 3 different options, but it might be different where you live. So just look around, talk to the gun shop, see if there's some ranges to shoot at. You'll find a place.
Yeah, and like Steve said, check out the National Shooting Sports Foundation's website, wheretoshoot.org. It's a great place to check out all year round as well. So
yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening. We will talk to you next time.
Yeah, you guys be safe.
Take somebody shooting.
That's right. That's my line.
Yeah, I stole it from you. See ya.
See you guys.
Thanks for listening to Range Minded. Find us online at Range Minded Podcast on Facebook, or send us an email at podcast@iishooting.com. We're always happy to get feedback, episode suggestions, whatever you want to send us, really. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts from. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.